Yeah, started.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so now it started, and so it will be downloadable.
Welcome to SustainBizz podcast, sipping change one conversation at a time. Discover the power of sustainable development goals on our podcast. The podcast transcends boundaries, connecting global leaders across sectors to drive meaningful change. Calling all leaders, visionaries, and change makers, it's time to be a part of something transformative. At SustainBizz, we are fueling innovation and change through enlightening conversations. Our podcast is your platform to share your story, your vision, and your commitment to sustainability. Join the sustainable revolution. Today, our prestigious and respected guest is Professor Dr. Phoebe Koundouri. She is Professor and Director of Research Laboratory on Socioeconomic and Environmental Sustainability, Athens University of Economics and Business. She is Director, Sustainable Development Unit at Athena Information Technology Research Center. She is also the founder and scientific director of Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation on Euphoria. She is also President, European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. She's chairing at Sustainable Development Solution Network, SDSN Global Climate Hub, and also co-chair at SDSN's Europe and Greece. She's also co-chair SDSN European Green Deal Senior Working Group. Ms. Koundouri, she holds an MPhil and PhD in economics from the University of Cambridge. She's recognized as a pioneer in innovative, human-centric, interdisciplinary systems for the sustainable interaction between nature, society, and the economy. She has published 15 books and more than 500 scientific papers, co-edited a number of prestigious academic journals, organized numerous international scientific conferences, seminars, supervised more than 30 PhD students, and gave keynote speeches and public lectures across the world. And I'm fortunate enough to meet her at recently had UN International Conference on Sustainable Development at Columbia University session, where she moderated this session proactively and with deep insight. Welcome to SustainBizz podcast. Professor Phoebe Koundouri, I just want you to introduce yourself and your key roles as an economist or as environmental scientist in the context of sustainability. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm very happy to be joining this podcast. And let me quickly say that this Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation on Euphoria, that is on sustainability, that I lead, integrates the work of the different institutions and research centers and accelerators and science policy networks that I lead or co-lead. So this Alliance of Excellence brings together the expertise of the Athens University of Economics and Business, and in particular, two laboratories. The one I lead on research on socioeconomic and environmental sustainability, and a second one I co-lead on stochastic methods and applications. Together with this, it brings together the Athena Research Center on Information Technologies and the unit that I lead on sustainable development there, emphasizing the need for understanding the sustainability transition as a transition that has a very important digital aspect in it. So this is the research center that is mainly focused on ICT and information technology. So this is where we bring in sustainability, transition, and digitalization. In addition to this, I'm also I have a double professorial affiliation together with the Athens University of Economics and Business. I also have a research professorship at the Technical University of Denmark, where I lead I call it the climate and energy research section of the Department of Technology Management and Economics. Now, these are the research centers which bring together more than 100 large interdisciplinary and intradisciplinary projects on sustainability, with a budget more than $500 million, with 200 researchers engaging in the research of these projects in order to build pathways for the sustainability transition. And in addition to this, our team also includes accelerators, innovation accelerators. So we are focusing not only on technological acceleration, but also acceleration of financial and social innovation. And these accelerators are Brigade Connect, which focuses on climate neutrality solutions, MENA Maritime Accelerator, which focuses on clean tech, zero emissions shipping and ports. The Black Sea Accelerator, which focuses on sustainable marine resources management. The SDSN Global Climate Hub. This is the global climate hub of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. This is a global network of more than 2,000 institutional members, and I lead the Global Climate Hub, where we focus on building national climate neutrality and resilience pathways. And I will talk more about this. And we are also co-leading the Climate Kick Institute of European Innovation, European Institute of Innovation and Technology, which is again focused on transition to a climate neutral economy. So this is what we do on innovation acceleration. Based on that, we truly believe, we deeply believe that innovation acceleration is important. So it's not just the research and the science-driven aspect of sustainability transition that we need to focus on, but also the need to accelerate the solutions into high TRLs and diffusion in the economy and the society, so they can be picked up quickly, adopted quickly, and help the speed of the transition to sustainability. Then we work on science policy networks. I already referred to SDSN, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is under the auspices of the General Secretary of the UN. I lead the European Hub and the Greek Hub, and this is a network focused on facilitating and accelerating the implementation of the 17 SDGs and the 169 goals within them. across the world, acceleration of the implementation. So we are focused on sustainability solutions that are readily implementable in order to help the achievement of the SDGs. And finally, I lead a number of scientific associations and academies. I'm the president of the European Association of Environmental Resource Economists. This is the biggest association of environmental resource economists in the world, which they work on financial and fiscal and economic instruments that can facilitate the transition to sustainability. I also chair the World Council of Environmental Resource Associations, which includes all environmental resource associations in the world, the European, of course, but also the American, the US, the Latin American, the African, the Asian, and the Australian associations. And I'm also elected fellow at Academia Europaea, the World Academy of Art and Science, the European Academy of Sciences and Art, and the Inter-Academy Partnership. So these are academies of top-rank researchers across the world. And each of these academies has a sustainability section where we try to focus on different angles of sustainability. And I can tell you more about this later on. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for such elaboration. And like what I picked from your introduction is that you are truly and deeply involved with all kind of research activities. And yes, now we are on the midway. It's 2023. We have 7 years left. The most important thing is acceleration. We need to do that.
Indeed, we need to do that. And it doesn't seem very possible that we will be able, all countries in the world will be able to fully implement the SDGs. It seems impossible at the moment, although we should keep trying. And the goals are targets, but they are targets in order to be met, of course. But even if we don't fully meet them, each and every country in the world, we at least have a blueprint for co-designing the growth strategy of each country. The more each country does, the better for itself and its people, and the better for the international community. And the less it is done is just an indication that it needs help, both help in terms of the technical expertise that are needed to implement and design the transition to SDGs implementation, but also in terms of the financing that is needed to do that. Financing has to do with the needed investments, the needed structural reforms, and of course, financing capacity building within the countries in order to have the labor force that can actually implement in order to acquire the social cohesion that is needed to actually implement the SDGs.
Yeah, this is, I think, a very important point you have indicated, especially if we talk about the developing world and the least developing regions of the world. When we, when we are looking at the SDGs and how to achieve that, a very big barrier is the lack of expertise. And even though we have expertise, for example, then comes a huge gap of how to finance that capacity building area and how to finance the track towards SDGs. So I believe the acceleration, which you just talked about, all the acceleration processes should include and should focus specifically on these two major hindrances which the developing world is facing. And upon that, I will just go to the next question, and that is, how important are interdisciplinary approaches in achieving sustainable interactions between nature, society, and the economy, particularly when considering the green investment? What's your view, since you have so much expertise in combining these three?
Yes. First of all, let me say that the issue of the developing world is huge, and it's something that we need to work on. The global economy is facing multiple shocks. They are threatening to further reverse the progress of the SDGs. We had the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, now the war in the Middle East, high inflation, weak economic growth, tightening monetary and fiscal conditions, unsustainable debt burdens, and escalating climate biodiversity emergencies. And all these shocks have a very significant impact on developing countries, which is further aggravated by the unfair global financial system. The global financial system is short-term oriented and crisis-prone, and it exacerbates inequalities. So we are also working in the international and UN arena, mostly through the Pontifical Academy of Science at the Vatican, to propose reforms for the global financial architecture in order to tackle the high cost of debt and rising risk of debt distress by converting short-term high-interest borrowing into long-term, more than 30-year debt at lower interest rates. Because the SDGs, investments in the SDGs are definitely growth enhancing for the countries, but these are long-term investments, education, better health, better infrastructure, better management of the environment. They need time to bring the goods. They need time to transpose into exponential growth for the country. But it is for sure that if you get all the kids at school in developing countries, then in 10, 15 years, this country will have a huge increase in its growth multipliers. So what we need to do is to massively scale up affordable long-term financing for development, especially through public development banks, multilateral development banks, and by aligning all financing flows with the SDGs. And this does not mean that we do not want the private sector. 2/3 of the money of the world is in private hands. So we need the public money to be efficiently blended with private money in order to support these investments. It is important to do that. And this is one big element of the transition that we need, and this is one big element of the forthcoming COP that we are going to investigate. So in this forthcoming COP, we will be focusing on the efficient design of the loss and damage fund, how the developed world can transfer money for climate resilience to the developing world. But the whole thing should not be just about climate. It should be about all the SDGs, because if we don't help the developing world, we cannot solve any of our global problems: climate, biodiversity collapse, And we cannot even have a sustainable economic growth. And we are missing the wealth of opportunities that are there in the technology transfer and in the development of the developing world. So in order to develop these countries and across this is not just relevant for the developed world, for the developing world, it's also relevant for the developed world. In order to have a sustainable, holistic, integrated approach to growth, you really need an interdisciplinary framework. And the interdisciplinary framework is well sketched out by the SDGs. We have 17 SDGs that touch upon the economy, the society, and also natural capital. And they indicate how these connect and how one can build pathways for a holistic implementation of these SDGs. It is not easy. Interdisciplinary approaches are difficult because they are much more complicated than what we are used to working in the silos of our sciences. But nowadays, there is a lot of interdisciplinary work that can lead the way. And it's not just between the disciplines that one has to work between natural sciences, engineering, social sciences, including economic statistics, econometrics, policy analysis, stakeholder integration in the co-design of the pathways. You really need to focus on this stakeholder integration because it's the interdisciplinarity aspect that will bring validation of the scientific pathways. It's the interdisciplinarity aspect that will allow all the relevant stakeholders to come in, understand not the science. They don't need to understand the details of the science, but they need to understand that the problem, why it affects them, why it is in their benefit to correct it, and how it can be corrected. And in the how, they should have a firm say of how to co-design. They should have a firm input from their experiences on how these pathways from where we are to where we want to go should look like. And this is the only way that they really become engaged in the conversation, engaged in the design of the pathways, and engage in the implementation. In this way, they become owners of the transition pathways, and hence they are more likely to implement it. And not just owners in a very abstract way, but also shareholders. Shareholders in the investments that will transform their future and will allow them to implement the pathways to sustainability.
Yeah. Basically, if we talk about, as you say, like we have to come up with a holistic approach when we talk about the climate change, and if we really talk about developing world, which is not, I can see like there are regions, obviously, which are contributing towards creating the climate change impacts. But there are regions who are, I think, contributing a very least percentage towards climate change, but they are the most big sufferers. And the point is that if they are facing, for example, the poverty, and if they are facing the hunger, and if they are facing the lack of education and the lack of proper economic infrastructure, so sometimes they are so much, busy coming up solutions with these things. They don't think that the climate change has some emergency for them, or they don't want to take it as a priority. So these are the challenges which I believe, living in that kind of environment, is that these are the real challenges where people just don't want to see that, because they are busy solving the other major problems which are popping in their everyday lives. So what do you think about that?
That is true. If I have subsistence issues, it would be difficult for me to be even organized around the big issues that are destroying my economy. It's difficult. But I think, unfortunately, this problem is slowly solved. And I say unfortunately because nowadays we have a different scenery than 25 years ago, that when I started my career at Cambridge University. Back then, we couldn't really feel the consequences of the destabilization of climate. Nowadays, climate change transposes into frequent and severe floods, heat waves, forest fires, tsunamis, hurricanes. So we see the effects and we see the devastation, and we lose lives and we lose infrastructure, and we have distractions and disruptions in the economic activity and in the value chain that is further adding to the misery of countries that are not on a growth path, let alone a sustainable growth path. So it becomes more and more obvious that this climate change, which basically is the destabilization of climate that transposes into increased frequency, severity of extreme weather events, including sea level rise, which for some developing countries is a major threat to their economic activity, because they are losing their coast, they are losing their land, they are losing their touristic capacity and more. So it is obvious that something needs to be done. Something needs to be integrated into the growth strategy of these countries in order to avoid further deterioration. And that part is not so much the responsibility of the developing countries, because most of the emissions come from the US, China, Europe, and India. So although India and China, one could arguably say that they are part of the developing world, they are strong enough to really introduce policies to mitigate climate change. And they have pledges that are not good enough in terms of the timing. India has a pledge for 2070 and China 2050, but a lot is happening within these countries, especially having to do with the decarbonization of the energy system. And much more, of course, needs to be done. But a lot is already done. And India is also very proactive in terms of ESG regulation with companies, which is very helpful. Now, in terms of the adaptation aspect of climate change, then this is something that these countries need to invest in, because the effects of climate change in the developing world are so pervasive that many times every year, their economies are devastated by huge extreme weather events. So they have to invest in protecting their citizens. And most of these countries do not have fiscal space, and most of these countries are not the main contributors to climate change. So that's why there is this vivid activity in the international community that we want to have the developed world contributing to the financial investments that will allow the developed world to safeguard its citizens from climate change, which is something that in the most part of it, they did not create. Climate change was created by the developed world. So that's why we are looking a lot on the loss and damage fund and try to put real money there for the developed countries to invest in protection of their citizens. And also, why they do that, to invest in capacity building in order to understand that the road to development should escape the fossil fuel industrialization that the developed world went through. That was a mistake. And they are lucky because they can escape that now with renewable energy being much cheaper than fossil fuel energy, with digitalization providing solutions for low climate footprint economic activities, with nature-based solutions being on the canvas of solution pathways, with circular economy provided many sustainable solutions. So nowadays we have more technology and cheaper technology that can allow these countries to develop and develop fast and develop in a green and digital and sustainable way. Something that the developed countries did not have during their industrial revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe there should be more and more developmental work towards global policies, which must be guiding the developing nations and the developing region, that how they can come up with better policies. And another thing is how the global financing infrastructure works to promote and to sustain the developing world. And I believe the United Nations and the many organizations which are working under the umbrella have proactively taken steps, especially when I see the policy making. But the gap which we find is when the global policies are coming, the regions which they should be impacting the most, are they going to impact them the most? There we find some gap, and absolutely we should be looking to filling those gaps. This is what I believe. And yes, you rightly pointed out that we need to come up with better energy transition. What do you think right now, like in terms of energy transition and in terms of renewable energy, which is happening around the world? Which countries and which regions are, you can say, on the right track right now?
Well, since 2015, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network has been publishing a report on the implementation of the SDGs in each and every country of the world. And as a co-lead of the European Hub of SDSN, I co-author a report on SDGs implementation. Every year it comes out on the SDGs implementation in each and every European countries and the Balkans. Together with this, every year we publish a report on a European Green Deal and its joint implementation with the SDGs. And as Global Climate Hub, we have just published a report on the decarbonization pathways for Europe, the Balkans, the UK, and 6 Asia countries. As I told you before, the mission of the Global Climate Hub is to create these decarbonization pathways for each and every country in the world. So I'm saying all this because we have enough evidence on where the world is going. And having said that, let me emphasize that what is important is to be able to measure, assess, and monitor. Unless we measure, assess, and monitor, we will never agree where we are. And if we don't agree as to where we stand against the SDGs, against decarbonization, against mitigating and adapting to climate change and so on, we will never be able to structure a correct pathway to go to full implementation of the SDGs. Because in order to structure your strategy, you need to agree where you are, where you want to go, and then develop the optimal mixture of technologies, policies, and finances that will allow you to go where you want to go. Now, in terms of decarbonization, obviously, the European Green Deal is the champion policy framework. It's a very holistic policy framework. It's a holistic framework that I dare say transposes the SDGs into the European reality. Not absolutely, not fully efficiently. We have done AI analysis to indicate the degree of the different European policies achieving to reflect the SDGs, but it is nonetheless the best effort we have. And it is again true that Europe is the leading example of decarbonization as a team, a group of countries. And of course, Northern Europe is doing much better than South Europe. And you can see where there is fiscal space for the initial investment, for example, on the grid, or for the initial investment on alternative fuels, initial investments on green technologies, then the transition is easier. When the fiscal space is very limited, then transition becomes more difficult. What is for sure is that although per unit of production of energy renewables are cheaper, what is not there is the infrastructural investment that will enable the use of the renewables. And this infrastructural investment, for example, the grid that will connect these renewables is a public investment. It can bring in private contractors as well, but this is where the difficulty comes from. The initial, mostly infrastructural investment that is needed in order to enable the use of the per unit renewables. Overall, the developed countries in the world are well placed now for the transition to a decarbonized world, very well placed, and one could easily say that advanced economies are nearing the levels needed to shift their trajectories towards net zero and achieve net zero by 2050. However, emerging and developing economies only earn 20% of the levels that are needed. Plus, they face increasingly narrowing fiscal options. So it's becoming even more difficult for them. However, in Europe, we have a lot of studies that show, general equilibrium studies that show that it is possible to implement all climate policies of the European Green Deal, and they are quite a few: the climate law, the EU taxonomy, the Fit for 55, so that Europe becomes climate neutral by 2050 and reduces CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases emissions by 55% by 2030. We can implement all those bunch of policies while mitigating all the regressive effects. We showcase in a general equilibrium analysis that it is possible to create packages of measures that support those that face the regressive effects from the implementation of climate policies, such as lump sum transfers from climate policies income and targeted energy efficiency measures and job retraining programs and funding of subsidies for new low carbon technologies via general taxation. And this package of measures allows increased growth of the GDP in the whole of Europe and in each and every country, increased employment, and increased equality between the regions of Europe. So it is possible. It is very possible. And it's the same for biodiversity policies. It is possible to meet food security together with biodiversity goals and together with climate goals. And this is the work of the Global Climate Hub. In the Global Climate Hub, we have a very holistic approach where we bring together the different systems that need to be transform in order to achieve climate neutrality and climate resilience: the energy system, the transport system, the land use system, and the marine use system. So we have models that simulate scenario that will allow these systems to become climate neutral and climate resilient by 2050, and also identify the just transition pathways. So how you can follow science in order to implement the climate neutrality pathways, and at the same time find the money to finance the transition, both in terms of infrastructure investment and in terms of investment in the capacity of the labor market to actually provide the skill and expertise that are needed for the transition. This is the work of the Global Climate Hub, which gathers all these data and models into AI platforms that are continuously monitoring and assessing and supervising and providing recommendations for the implementation of this transition.
So do you think the European Green Deal can be guidance for a global policy towards decarbonization and towards every kind of positive steps towards SDGs? Do you think it has the capacity to guide the global economies?
I think it's the leading example that we have now. I think if all the regions of the world could have a Green Deal that is transposed with care to their idiosyncratic features, but be a Green Deal that is detailed enough, like the European, to restructure all the sectors of the economy and care about social cohesion, then yes, it's at the moment the leadership example. Having said that, our AI analysis showcases that the policies of the European Green Deal are heavily focused on the SDGs transformations that are relevant to sustainable management of natural capital and production of food, and also the SDGs that are relevant to energy decarbonization and sustainable industry. And there is some focus on the digital revolution for sustainable development, sustainable cities and communities, but the European Green Deal is somewhat weak on the social cohesion SDGs, weak on education, gender inequality, health, well-being, and demography. And we know that no big transformation can actually happen without social cohesion, without the engagement and the cohesion of the stakeholders. So this is an aspect that the European Green Deal is not really a flagship example, and it could be further elaborated into the policy framework and further financed into the policy framework. The element of the European Green Deal that is, I think, noticeable is, in addition to what I said before, it's efficient policies on energy decarbonization, sustainable industry, and sustainable use of food production, land, water, and oceans. It's the EU taxonomy, the EU taxonomy that tries to divert capital flows to sustainable activities, economic activities. It identifies explicitly which activities are sustainable and hence can get cheap loans, climate change mitigation investments, adaptation investments, protection of water and marine resources, transition to circular economy, pollution control, and protection of ecosystem. If you invest and your investment has a big proportion on these elements that I've mentioned, then you will get a good loan. And not only this, but also the EU taxonomy introduces a corporate sustainability reporting directive that it's now an obligation for all large companies and all companies listed in regulated market. It requires auditing and specific information and digitally tracking the information. So this ESG new era, let's say, that it becomes obligatory from 2024 for large companies and 2027 for all companies, SMEs including. It's changing a lot of things in private resources, private capital. And it's good that it's happening, and very interesting initiatives relevant to this one are happening in other areas of the world that will identify India here, who are very, another flagship example in the way ESG is infiltrating the corporate world and private capital. And let me here also identify a methodology that my team has developed in order to integrate ESGs and SDGs SDGs downscale to a company level. Why we want to do that? Because ESGs are about the environmental footprint, the social footprint, and the governance footprint of a company. But they forget that the business of businesses is profit. So you need to integrate in them profit, financial sustainability. And once you do that, then you can see how many the wealth of opportunities, profitable opportunities that sustainability is bringing to the companies. And if you do that along the value chain of a company, you can really identify the transformations that will produce lower environmental footprint, lower better governance, higher social footprint, positive social footprint, and at the same time bring profit to the company. So this ESG SDG methodology that we have, it's actually identifying the profitable opportunities for the transition to the green and digital wealth, and it allows you to identify along the value chain where your weaknesses are, how far away you are from implementing fully the SDG company transformation, and then where you can implement transformation that will allow you to implement your legal obligations against ESG and at the same time make profit. And this is not just relevant for product companies and services companies, it is also relevant for asset management companies. We can identify profitable portfolios that are hedging against all the SDG risk and showcase that these portfolios are on average more profitable than portfolios that are not hedging against SDG risk.
Yeah. I believe the system your team has developed, I can see that we can call it a profitable transition. It's because if we use these kind of to the business sector, I think they can be attracted more. Like they can see that the system basically can track them towards more profitability by adopting those guidelines of ESG and SDG. This is what I believe, and how we can come up with tools to attract specifically the business structures in developing countries, which are like which know they know what's going on and what is the environment and what are their limitations, but still they are reluctant. And this is one of the things like we can I think this is the only point like if there is a profitable increase, then most of the companies can be attracted to that. And I think here I have a question that how do you see that specifically the type of environment we are talking about, that how do you see the green investments playing a pivotal role in promoting sustainable practices globally in developed countries, as we can see that they are reaching to some good targets. But if you see the developing countries, how do you see that these kind of investments can promote the practices, the sustainable practices, which again is a huge gap?
Yes, infrastructural investments, the big challenge is how you finance them. Once you finance them, then the other big challenge, which you will have to face early on, is the capacity to use them, right? Yeah. So that is why it is important to identify what the future sustainability means for the labor market. And we have done such a report with Highway, the digital company, and we have identified the green and digital occupations of the future. And at the same time, we have identified the green and digital skills that will be needed for the future. And this is very important to know because it should be integrated into school and university curricula, and it should also be integrated into vocational training. So in terms of professions, we find that energy assessor, natural resource consultant, energy conservation officers, environmental policy officers, energy analysts, and environmental experts are the green occupations of the future. And with regards to digital occupations, we have webmaster, software tester, user interface developer, ICT network administrator, database integrator, and system configuration. And the combined green and digital new professions are looking at smart home engineers, smart home installer, geothermal technician, green ICT consultant, irrigation technician, and environmental education officer. These are the new occupations, and these are the occupations that are dictated by the green and digital transition. So if developing countries finally find the finance to invest in the green and digital transition, and they should find this finance through multilateral investment banks, but also through enabling their countries to attract private or blended finance investments for the green and digital transition. For this, as I said, a lot needs to be done by the developed world. But even if they find the money, they also need to invest in these new occupations that I've said that are so important for actually engaging your labor force, engaging your society into this green and digital transition, because the society will engage only if it has the capacity to engage. If they feel that this green and digital transition will leave them behind, then they will oppose to the transition, and the speed of the transition will be slow. There is no way not to have a green and digital transition nowadays. Is the future. Is the cost-effective future, both in terms of the actual per unit cost of the technologies, but also in terms of our need to sustain the wealth and climate we can survive in, right? Because otherwise we will not survive. But a lot of investment in this is needed, and a lot of transformation in the curricula of universities and vocational training is needed. And in terms of the skills of the future, the green and digital skills of the future, the top green and digital skills that we have identified with our AI approach are environmental protection technology, complying with environmental protection laws and standards, operating agriculture and forestry equipment, using precision measurement equipment, designing electrical and electronic systems, and monitoring environmental conditions. So you can see the world is changing, and countries need to invest in this change in order to survive.
Yeah. So here I just want you to highlight any obviously you must be having many ongoing projects going on within the Sustainable Development Research Unit at Athena Information Technology Center. which you think holds very significant potential for advancing sustainability and attracting green investment across various sectors? If you just want to highlight any ongoing project.
Yes, I think, I mean, we have many projects on this, for more than 100 projects at the moment with more than $500 million financing, but mainly we work on 5 different areas. One is about SDG and ESG measurement at country level, at the region level, at city level, at local authority level, and importantly, at company level. So we measure the performance, ESG and SDG performance, and then we identify the gap between where we are and where we want to go for full implementation of SDGs and the ESG regulation, and then build pathways to do that. So one big area of what we do is about that. And it's also about sustainable finance. How do you finance the transition pathways? How do you implement the steps? How do you finance the steps in order to get to full implementation of the regulation and the SDGs? We also work a lot on pathways for climate neutrality and resilience. So in the previous aspect of ESG measurement, I think very helpful for companies is also our 3-step approach and e-tool that can enable profitable transformations, profitable ESG and SDG transformations for companies. Secondly, we work through the Global Climate Hub that I lead a lot on identifying climate neutrality and climate resilience pathways for each and every country of the world. And we are very eager to work with national stakeholders to co-design these pathways. We have already co-designed pathways for Europe, UK, the Balkans, and East Asian countries, and we move with more countries in the future. Third, we work on sustainable seas and oceans, the whole marine ecosystem, which is about climate neutral shipping, ports, coastal management, fisheries, aquaculture, energy production from the sea, protection of ecosystem services of the sea, and so on. Fourth, we work on sustainable land use and water, food, energy nexus, and biodiversity pathways. This is very important because food security is very important and is put into danger due to climate change and ecosystems collapse. And we know that we need to achieve food security while we achieve our biodiversity and climate targets. And this is a holistic, integrated, and challenging problem to solve. At Academia Europaea, we now, as Sustainability Task Force, work for launching an intergovernmental panel for food security and sustainability of food systems, which could be the twin of IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. And lastly, we work a lot on innovation, acceleration, education, upskilling, and reskilling, because it is important in order to get all these new technologies and methods actually implemented in order to have the transition. So these are the 5 aspects that we work on. Each one is supported with many different projects, and we are very eager to share and showcase and provide support and consulting for any nation or authority or company that is interested to invest in the transition. The transition will happen We have the technology, we have the money, we need the transformational capacity to actually accelerate it in order for it to happen, because before we have irreversible climate and ecosystems collapse.
Yeah, that is, I think, very true. And here, I think, comes the importance, like how the academia, the industry, and the policymakers, they collaborate more effectively to drive sustainable agendas and attract green investment on global scale. And what do you think, like, if these three important components on national level or regional level, on global level, how best they can collaborate? Any good advice you want to give for academia, industry, and policymakers?
In the Global Climate Hub, we have 9 different units. One of them is on transformative participatory approaches to co-designing the solutions. And first of all, each of the stakeholders needs to gain the capacity to be an active participant in a living lab, let's say, where the science recommendations, the science-based recommendations are discussed. So once science can provide the simulations and scientists have their models and their solutions, then you need to get the relevant stakeholders around the same table, and the relevant stakeholders will be mapped and chosen according to the scale of your intervention. You need to have them around the same table in order to agree on 3 things: where we are, and that's why the measurement is important; where we want to go. Usually this is easier because there are international, regional, and national regulations that are binding, and the how we are going to get there. It takes about a year to agree to where we are and where we want to go. And then it takes another year in order to discuss science-based recommendations, science-based simulations, and refine them in order to reflect the expertise and knowledge of the stakeholders. And once you go through this procedure of 2 years, then you see that stakeholders really engage and become owners of the pathways. It is crucial to make them shareholders of the investments that are included in these pathways, and then they go out and implement. This is easier to do within the same nation, more tricky between nations. But basically, you need to find exactly where the synergies are and invest on those synergies and invest on those things that are win-win situations, and then identify the trade-offs and find a way to mitigate the regressive effects, have the fiscal space to mitigate the regressive effects, to support the vulnerable and the losers. Supporting the losers means, for me at least, to help them transform into becoming part of the transition rather than losers of the transition. And this is what I say to fossil fuel industry. You need to invest in becoming clean tech, in alternative fuels, in renewables, and you need to do that fast so that you're not a loser, but you are one of the transformative forces. And if you support this with this transition, this transformation with subsidies and capacity building and financial instruments and cheap loans, then it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. When countries are involved, and if you are in Europe, it's easier because there is common legislation. Outside Europe, I think this standardization of legislation is crucial. And even at the global level is crucial because we live in a global world. Value chains are global. So global standards are important, and true willingness to implement these standards. Policies need to be implemented, and they need to be monitored and assessed continuously. And those who implement them, they need to see the benefits of their hard work. They need to be the most profitable, the most innovative, the ones that are going to gain the biggest share of the market. Because one other important element is not just a supply side transformation, is a demand side transformation as well. The more educated people are and the more aware they are about the sustainability, the need for sustainability transition, the potential of sustainability transition, then they will be demanding more sustainable products and services. And this will increase the market share of those that provide sustainable products and services and shrink the market share of those that don't. So demand and supply forces are there to be accelerated and to be financed in order to make the transition.
Yeah, I think these are like you can say proper basic guidelines, which obviously can be adopted with much expertise and much guidance. And here, like I would like you with so much extensive academic experience, what do you think that what are the notable trends or shifts you have observed in the field of sustainable development over the years, and how they have impacted the broader sustainability and green investment landscape in Europe and outside Europe? What's your
Well, the big shift in Europe is the European Green Deal.
Yeah.
It's a very holistic, integrated policy framework that has been laid out and detailed in order to achieve the sustainability transition, and financed as well. And even after the COVID major disruption, the growth strategy of Europe remained the European Green Deal. And the Next Generation EU, which was the fund that supported the recovery from COVID, in a sustainable way, really focused on sustaining the principles, the policies of the European Green Deal. And it explicitly focused on the green and digital transition. It funded decarbonized power generation and industry, it funded circular economy projects, projects that protect and restore biodiversity, projects that strengthen sustainable mobility. These were the green elements, and the digital elements were improving connectivity, helping citizens develop digital skills, deploying cutting-edge technologies, and improving cybersecurity. So the European Green Deal has been a major shift, and I think it has the potential to really transform Europe. Now, outside Europe, of course, the UN climate conferences, UNFCCC, and the biodiversity conference is really very important. It is also important that we have the Climate Act in the US and major transformational policies in India. But what I think is crucial is for the UN conferences for the climate and biodiversity to be truly integrated in the discussions of G7 and G20. It is important that African Union is becoming part of the discussions in the G20. But what we really need to do is to get the strong economies in the world showcase a global standardized way in terms of restructuring global financial architecture in order to focus on SDG stimulus investments. If the G7 and the G20 agree to do that within the SDG framework and integrate the decisions that are taken in at the COPs and the biodiversity conferences, then we have a true way to become sustainable. Because becoming sustainable means that you are using your three forms of capital: natural, human, and man-made capital, in ways that really allow the investments that will produce positive growth multipliers and positive job multipliers while achieving greater equality around the world. So if these global fora really get together to discuss this while finding a way to cease wars, and it doesn't seem to be going well with the Ukrainian war, with the war in the Middle East, with other wars that are going on at the moment, I think we should have a reasonable pathway. But we cannot have the COP and then the biodiversity conference and then the G20 and then G7, and the four never really integrating, never really having a common framework and a common pathway. We need that sort of coordination between the big economies around the world, because they are those that they will coordinate their growth towards the SDG stimulus, and they are those that need to help finance the rest of the world into an SDG stimulus. And if we achieve that, it's a win-win situation, because again, it's a global economy, value chains are global, and the wealth of opportunities is global.
I think the very important point which you just pointed out is that all these big forums, I don't know, like how they can integrate more and how they can share the data and whatever the discussions they are having annually, how they can integrate all those. I think that is one of the very important points which you have pointed, and this can be a big problem solver in light of the recent events, especially when we just had UN SDG Summit and the General Assembly and the International Conference on Sustainable Development. What are the key trends and initiatives related to climate change, global policy, which you find that it's noteworthy, and especially with respect to the role of global financial organizations? What are the impacts of all these recent events, specifically on the policymaking?
Well, the SDG summit agreed that there is some progress with SDG implementation, but it's not enough. We all agreed in that.
Yeah.
And it needs to be accelerated. Different global fora agree on this as well. And they identify finance as a major obstacle. Finance and political will.
Yeah.
So we need to focus on restructuring the global financial infrastructure, and we need to focus on leadership, political leadership. Political leadership seems weak for solving the problems that we are facing, because these are huge problems. So basically, in addition to the restructuring of global financial infrastructure, which I've talked already, it's about having political leaders that can talk to each other, first of all, and can identify the pathways towards growth, which is an SDG stimulus growth, because we have our blueprint. 193 countries have signed these goals. They are a reasonable set of goals and targets that can lead the sustainability transition. But what is missing is this political will to make these goals the flagship investment blueprint of a country, because these goals basically can tell you how a country is performing in all different angles of its reality, identify weak points, and then you can come in and make investments for those weak points in a way that is holistic enough that it provides positive externalities to all other aspects of the economy of the society. So we have our blueprint. We need to get our finances right, but in addition to this, we need political leadership that can allow sincere discussions between countries in order to identify win-win situations and mostly decrease inequality. Decreasing inequality means that I need to step back from a leadership that is led by the already rich and powerful. You need a leadership that embraces the needs of the rich and powerful, but also integrates the needs of the less powerful and the more needy. And in order to do this, you also need to restructure financing and incentives within each and every country. And while doing those, to also support profit making, to also support incentive-based instruments. So this is not a call for a less free society. It is a call for a society that understands that investing in mitigating regressive effects and caring for the vulnerable will increase the potential of profitable opportunities, will increase the growth of a country, not just in terms of GDP, but in terms of happiness, in terms of knowledge, in terms of good health, in terms of environmental sustainability, all those aspects that make people flourish. And when people flourish, the economies flourish. So it's a different understanding of how growth can be implemented. And it does take a very strong leader to realize that, the population are not the huge multinationals, are not the very rich. The population, it's something much more inclusive, and its needs and its support is paramount to having growth, inclusive growth that is about people and the interaction of people with nature and happy societies. And this does not mean that you have to kill you have to destroy what is flourishing. It means that you have to sustain it in a way that it sustains its own power, which of course is the people. Companies need the people. Politicians need the people. They are their bases. They have to start caring for them. They have to start caring for them. And in order to care for them, you have to have a very supporting financial infrastructure to allow you to finance all aspects of human life, including a profit, but not only that. Social cohesion is very important, and it should be the basis of growth. And social cohesion means that each and every person is supported, especially vulnerable persons are supported in a way that they can become strong and integrated in the labor market and produce growth, not only for themselves, but for everybody. It's easier done or than said, but it is the only way forward. You have to understand that growth is financial sustainability, fiscal sustainability, social cohesion, environmental sustainability integrated in a clever, effective, and fast transformation process.
Yeah, and I think with this kind of holistic approach, only then we can see, we can be hopeful, and we can create a more sustainable world. And I just want you to just highlight in a brief way, like in your role as a chair of SDSN Global Climate Hub, what is your own personal vision for the hub, and how are you planning for the next, specifically if we talk about the short-term plan, the next 7 years? What are your targets? What are the targets of this Global Climate Hub?
Well, our target is to work with all the countries of the world to co-design with the country stakeholders their transition pathways to climate neutrality and climate resilience, and not just design them, but also help them support a just transition to climate neutrality and climate resilience through building the socioeconomic narrative for that. So this Global Climate Hub, as I said before, has 9 units, one that collects, integrates all data and platforms and digital applications that are needed to support our modeling. Then we have a unit on atmospheric physics and climatology modeling, one on climate and energy, the decarbonization modeling, one on land use and climate, again, how you produce food and use land in a climate resilient and climate neutrality way. Then a unit on climate and health, mental and physical health, a unit on innovation acceleration for climate neutrality. And then we have 3 units that are about implementing the models that derive from the first 6 units, the science-based model, into the society. And in order to do this, you need to make sure that you have paved the socioeconomic pathway for a just transition. You have identified who is going to pay, who is going to support the investments, how you're going to care for the vulnerable, how are you going to mitigate regressive effects on the vulnerable, and do that in a way that it includes all stakeholders. So in transformative participatory approaches where all stakeholders are there to co-design the just transformation that is based on your science modeling. And then the final unit, you are also there to upskill and reskill and educate the co-designers in order to have the capacity to really implement what they co-design. So our vision is to go through this process with each and every country in the world and really build a robust and just and effective, efficient, sustainable pathways towards climate neutrality, climate resilience. And it would be amazing if these pathways could support, explicitly support the design of each and every nation's pathway to climate neutrality and resilience by 2050. And we think this is very much needed because, first of all, this is the most holistic, science-based, inter and interdisciplinary approach towards designing these pathways. And second of all, but very importantly, throughout my journeys across the world, I've been to more than 120 countries. Nowadays, you don't get any country saying, I don't care about climate change. I don't think climate change is relevant. What you get is, okay, climate change is here, but I have a very upscale climate and energy plan. How do I really implement? So they need the detail of the transition pathways. And this is what we are giving them, the detail of the transition pathway. And not only that, but also an answer to their other question, where am I going to find the fiscal means to implement? We try to identify that as well. How do you finance the climate neutrality and resilience transition? And effectively, we are looking at blended finance, how you get the fiscal space of public resources integrated with private resources in order to finance this transition.
Yeah, and like having said that, like you have been to different, obviously, dozens of countries and can experience what's going on around the world in different part of the world. What do as you travel in different region, what do you think, like are we on the right track towards creating sustainable tourism around the world? Are we only talking about, or are we really implementing the things which are guiding, especially when UNWTO is guiding us and creating some kind of clear guidelines? As you travel, how do you see the countries are implementing those principles into their sustainable tourism master plans and policy making and implementation?
Yes. Sustainable tourism is one big issue. I think at the moment we more talk about it than actually implementing. And it's really an urgency because tourism is a big percentage of the GDP of, in principle, vulnerable countries, small island states or developing countries. And unfortunately, the model now is big numbers, low sustainability, integration. And what is needed is to provide these countries with the capacity and skill to use their natural capital, because mostly their tourism comes from their endowment of natural capital. So for them, the sustainability transition is paramount, because their capital, what attracts this GDP growth enhancing sector, the demand for this sector for tourists, is their endowment of natural capital. So unless they find ways to make tourists sustainable, which basically means sustain its profitability, but without destroying their natural capital, their endowment of natural capital, is something that needs to happen very, very urgently. There are ways for sustainable tourism, many ways. Actually, it's easy because your natural capital is what you provide, is the service that you provide. It is important that they understand how each and every touristic unit, each and every touristic area can transform into implementing the SDGs. It is important that the service providers are educated against this, and they are also equipped with means of attracting investments that can transform them into sustainable services. But it is also important for the national policy to allow them to make this transformation. So you need an overall national policy which will allow you to integrate sustainability principles in your hotels, in the services that you provide, in preserving the natural parks that are very important for attracting tourists, and making every bit of your value chain sustainable. The way people travel to you, what they eat, what kind of infrastructure and establishments you have, and so on. So it needs a capacity building within the sector, and it also needs capacity building with in order to embrace the tourist sustainability into national and international policies. There are initiatives like that that try to implement the transformation, but still, I would say we are more talking about this than really acting. I need to get to my next meeting, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure. Sure. And I think right now, like I think you have given so much time to us, and it's really an enlightening session for me. And obviously, when we will take this program to our viewers and to the readers, obviously they will also get all the inspiration from. So in closing, what I believe that our conversation with you has shed light on the role of interdisciplinary collaboration and green finance in advancing sustainability. Your insights, especially on the importance of investment in recent global policy initiatives, and especially what I believe they are inspiring us to take proactive step towards more sustainable and environmentally conscious future. And on that note, I just don't want to waste your time. Just want a quick message to all the viewers and the readers, which you want to give, and then we will say goodbye to you.
Well, the message is that sustainability is our future, is the way to guarantee our survival. We have the science, we have the technology, we even have the money. We need to streamline the money to support the science-based solutions and the technological advancements, and at the same time support the need for increased capacity for adoption of the science-based solutions and technological advancements. But most of all, we need sustainability leadership. So be careful with who you choose to lead your future. That would be the message.
Thank you for such a powerful message. And again, I just want to tell to the viewers and readers that at SustainBizz, we are fueling innovation and change through enlightening conversations. Our podcast is your platform to share your story, your vision, and your commitment to sustainability. And thank you very much, Professor Koundouri. And I would love to connect with you again, and you are free to give us a call and we can have another enlightening session with you. Thank you so much for your time.